Before we get started in this chapter, I have a confession to make. Photoshop has, well, it has a split personality, and I have noticed that over the years, as it's evolved, it's getting worse and worse. Well, I'm talking about raster versus vector here, which is actually a cool thing. Photoshop grew up as a raster-based application to work on photographs and resolution. We talked about this in a previous chapter. We live and die on the resolution of the image. But it also did, years ago, some vector stuff. But it has grown as the years have gone on, and it does even more vector stuff. Now, to understand vector, you need to understand the Paths panel right here. I am in the Essentials workspace, so it's right down here. If you don't see Paths, you can go right up to the word Window and go down to Paths. Incidentally, if you have close access to your working folder, which I hope you do, I am in paths101.psd. Now, to be honest with you, you can open up a blank document. There's not really anything special about this document. Let me move Paths over here. Okay, and so we can see layers now, and we can see Paths. If you did not have the Paths panel, you would not have the ability to do anything in vector in this program. The question arises then, why do we need to do vector in Adobe Photoshop? Text is vector-based, so it's kind of important that we can do text. And basically, because of the control we now have, as this program has evolved, we have the ability to bring in more and more Illustrator stuff and even do editing directly in Photoshop, almost as if we are in Illustrator. Now, don't get me wrong. This program here is not Adobe Illustrator, and I don't want it to be. I don't want a Swiss Army knife kind of approach to programming. I want a separate program with all the people at Adobe that work on Illustrator and figure out how to make it cool, and the same with Photoshop. I want them separate, but I want to be able to work between them, and that's becoming easier and easier. So we have the Paths panel open over here. Let's go over to our Pen tool, which is right here. If I click on it and hold, you will notice we have other tools, and we'll talk about those in this chapter. Let's concentrate on just the primary, been there forever, since the first Adobe Illustrator program came out in 1987. Actually, it was called Illustrator 88, but it came out right at the end of 87, and I actually used it. The Pen tool really hasn't changed that much. It is a foundational tool that we can use to basically draw vector shapes. With the tool selected, we come over here, and I've got a triangle area, a rectangle, a circle, and a whatever area. Before we get started, I want you to come up to this area right here where it says shape for me. Might not say that for you. But if you click it, make sure you're on path. I'm going to come down here. Before I start, notice to the right and down below the Pen tool is a small asterisk. Now, what does that mean? Well, the tool is talking to you. It's communicating, saying what it's going to do. If you see an asterisk next to the Pen tool, it's saying you are about to draw a brand new shape. I'm not going to connect to anything. There's nothing else going on. Go ahead, get started. So all I'm going to do, we're going to do some straight lines here, is click right about here. Just click. Now notice the asterisk goes away. If you see a clean pen tool, you may not see that anchor point. That's what that's called, an anchor point, little nail in the wall, if you will. When you see that anchor point and then you see your cursor without anything, it means whether you want to or not, it's going to connect to it. So if I come down to about here, and click again, you can see it makes another anchor point. This is a line segment, and it's a straight line, shortest distance between 2 points because I clicked without doing anything else. And if I come over to, say, I don't know, about here, and I do that again, getting a straight line was an accident. We'll talk about how we do that later. I want to close the shape off. Right now it's an open shape. If I come up here to close it off, you'll see a little circle come up. The circle means close the shape off. And if I click, we have our first shape. Now, I don't know if you noticed this or not, but there was nothing over here until I clicked here. And then in the Paths panel, it began creating what is called a work path. And the work path is holding the math in a raster-based program so it can use it when we need it. That's why the Paths panel is here. Now, work path is a nice name, but it doesn't really say much to me. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to double-click, and I'm going to call it triangle. Click OK. If I decide to do my rectangle over here right now, and I have that path selected, it will be more than glad to put that path inside of the same Paths layer, if you want to call it that. I don't want to do that. I want a new one. I need to click down here, which is new, and say, let's call this one rectangle, because that's what's kind of going to go in there, I guess. The thing to remember now is that when I click down here, nothing's selected. If you begin a path, no big deal, but if you begin a path without any other path selected, it will assume you want to make a new path. So if I come over here and begin drawing, there'll be a new path. Don't want that. I want it in rectangle, so make sure you select there. However, I could put it back here in triangle if I wanted to. Let's go to rectangle. Let's come over here and start right about here. See the little asterisk again, meaning, hey, starting out something new. This time, when I come over here, I'm going to hold the Shift key down. Now, when I do that, it guarantees the segment will be horizontal between the two anchors. So I look at that as putting two nails in a board and stretching a rubber band between the two. Now, don't worry about that little symbol that's over there now. We'll talk about that in a minute. Come down to here. Gets blank again. I'll hold the Shift key again, so it's straight down, vertical. Come over here again. Now, here's the problem. If I hold the Shift key down, I'm guaranteed I'll get a straight line this way, but I don't really know where to be to get a straight line up here, and we'll talk about that in a second. Let's come to about here, hold the Shift key down. Okay, then you come back up here and click, and I didn't make it by a long shot. So once you've drawn something, how do you do some simple editing to it? Well, that takes us to another tool. It's right down here. This one right here. If you click and hold, you'll see a path selection and a direct selection. Path selection allows you to select the whole path. Direct selection allows you to select an anchor point and then manipulate the anchor point, just like in Adobe Illustrator. Come over here and click on the path. Now you see the anchors come up. Now click on the one you want to change, which would be either this one in pulling it in or this one in pulling it out. Up to you. Let me click on this one. Now I could drag it, but I don't really consider that all that precise. Use your arrow keys. And as you do, you can slowly move it out. These are left, right, until you get it nice and straight up and down. So now we have a path with a rectangle and a one with a triangle. Let's continue the process. This time we won't select anything up here and we will begin drawing, and then we'll change the name after the fact. So let's come over here and reselect the pen tool. Now this time, in order to make a circle, obviously a circle is curved, it's not straight. Straight lines are very easy to make in any vector program. You just click, move to the next point, click, and that's all you're doing. When you curve one, you're clicking and dragging. So something like this. So I get right about here and I click and drag. Now when I do, it creates direction points off the anchor that are going to influence the curvature of the line. If I get to about here and let go. Okay, so there's my first point. If I come over about as far over as I went down, somewhere around there, and that's just a guess. Click again, and I'm going to drag up this time. See if I can match those two circles on the bottom, about like that. There's my second. I'm going to come over here and click again. See the little circle come up, and I'm going to come back down again to this one. And I've got, well, a little wonky circle there. Let's do this. Let's pick up our direct selection tool. Come over to it and click on. Now, when you want to change, maybe move it in a little bit or out, you want to make sure that you click on it and you see both direction lines coming off of it. And then we could kind of maybe bring it down a little bit and then bring it in. And we are doing this by our eyes, obviously. We're not using any kind of template. We're making something like a circle, a triangle, and a rectangle just by freeform drawing with the pen tool. So now we got that one. See, there's work path. We can come over here, select it, double click, and type in circle, because that's what it is. Let's do one more, what I call whatever. Let's not select anything over here. If I go back to my pen tool and select it, the second one down is called a freeform. You can come over here and say you're trying to trace out something. You could actually draw to trace that out, which is a lot easier in a sense than trying to do that with the pen tool and making straight and curved as you go with different paths. Now you come back over here, see the little circle come up? What it is basically a free form shape. Now if we go back into our direct selection tool and click on it, you can see it's got all kinds of points on it. We can click any one of those we want and we can begin changing the shape. Creating paths in Adobe Photoshop is relatively easy, I suppose. Once you get used to the pen tool, you can do some pretty neat stuff in this program. But the question begs itself is, why are we doing it? I think that's a little bit more important than drawing a line, is why are we doing it? Well, that's why we're here in this chapter. We're just getting started.